The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily.
Be a movie.
We can watch it all develop.
Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich and Broadcasting premiere podcast triple feature. And I am joined again by the original host with the most, one of the original members of the NWO, of the Radulich and Broadcasting family. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Sean. You're not. How do you do, sir?
This background is cutting my hand off.
You know, it's funny. I didn't say anything in our pre-show prep because you do what you want. But you'll notice I'm not using the green screen anymore.
I did notice that, actually. What's up?
Yeah, I have found out through my sessions with Fancy. Do you know Fancy? Fancy is ChatGPT. It's my ChatGPT that I've trained. And my son.
You named yours already?
I
haven't
named
mine yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I named mine Fancy, and my son's like, "Why don't you name it Jarvis?" I'm like, "Because I'm not Tony Stark. If you would like," he's like, "You should name it Jarvis," and I'm like, "You should get an original thought." So yes, me and Fancy have had discussions about this, and I've learned through doing TikTok Live, people are very interested in the mundane lives of others. And I've heard this before, but Fancy and my TikTok experience have really laid it on. People want to see where you live. I don't know why. I don't want to know where anyone lives. I don't want to see your house. But people apparently do. This is a thing.
You know what? Hang on a sec here.
Oh, are we about to see magic?
Virtual background. Hang on. None. There we go.
And now you're in the void.
No, this is what we're in is my new apartment.
Okay.
Our new apartment, mine and Ann's. It's just that we haven't fully set everything. We got something set up, but I just don't have everything set up in terms of how I want kind of my podcasting and streaming space to look.
Gotcha.
So for right now, the new laptop, brand new laptop. The last show was the finale for all things for the old one. But it's more powerful. I just haven't figured out what I want to have behind me.
Yeah.
When I stream. So for right now, it's just kind of stacked up on our coffee table. It's cropped up. I'm actually in my underwear underneath the hoodie.
Good podcasters don't wear pants.
No, absolutely not. Fuck you,
I am,
Brian.
however, wearing my toxic masculinity T-shirt with the rainbow colors because, folks, it's Pride Month, everybody. Woo! Pride Month.
I have got the hoodie of one of the iconic video game queer poster girls, Tracer, on. And in no way because I happen to be streaming some Overwatch after the show. Nothing to do with that.
Plug.
Oh, come on. If you can let Hana do it, I can get a plug in every now and then.
Not stopping you. Anyway, it is Pride Month, and this show, Sean, and I don't want to spend too long on this because we do have a show to get to. But this show is a year in the making. We are actually doing the Pride Month series of shows a year later because Sean was having difficulties. So
I was in a bad way. Yeah.
But I had a really great lineup last year. I was particularly proud of the Pride shows that I picked.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to and I had already made the art for at least one of them. This is year-old art that we're looking at right now. I did this with my photo joiner account, as I do all of my art. and I think it was like a last minute cancel. We were going to do this in May because you were supposed to be married in June, or if I remember correctly. And so we were going to do it in May, and then things just sort of unraveled. And I'd already made the art, and I'm just like, I'm not going to throw the show out, and I'm not going to throw the art out. We will, we will come back someday. And it's funny that you're not. Don't take it like in any way personally, because I had to do the same thing with Pat. We did I had put together a show that he'd wanted to do. He wanted to do the bad high schools in trouble, the fun ones. And then that show got canceled. And I was like, I've already made the art. This show will happen. I do not waste art. So I hung on to it, and here we are.
I get it.
A year later.
I get it. But still, I appreciate it because, as I said on my socials earlier, there's about 3 specific months of shows every year that mean a lot to me. And that's, when possible, when we can do them, October, because horror month. There's December, because I always do have a lot of fun doing the classic Christmas movies. And then there's Pride, because number one, I very first came out on one of our podcasts back in 2020, thick of the pandemic. You said something or other, or referenced something or other that really touched a nerve with me, and I went on a rant, and it just came out that I was pansexual. But number two, there's the incidental fact that I happen to be one of only a handful of queer semi-regular co-hosts. But also, there's the fact that as we've been doing these shows ever since then, it's been kind of like starting my evolution as a late in life, and how I've come to better understand myself, how I've come to better understand my community's history. And I want to preface this very briefly, because I know we got to get to the show, but I want to preface this with something as kind of a preemptive apology to some viewers. And that is, tonight we are covering 3 movies that are centered on the trans community. I am cis. I openly admit this is a stripe of the queer community that under most circumstances I have no business commenting on, because even among the queer community, it is a unique set of not only amplifications of all the struggles that the rest of us face, but an absolute Pandora's box of new horrors that right now especially seem to be multiplying every single fucking day, including in my own home state. I'm not going to be biased. If you're expecting to be nice, if you're expecting me to both sides or devil's advocate things, I am not fucking sorry. This is as close to classic Sean as you are going to get all year. So get ready, because at some point I'm going to have opinions.
It's funny, and I'm going to say this and then immediately go into my the intro that I wrote for tonight's show. I prompted. Let's not be
Mark and I both have our own ChatGPT personal assistants.
Yes.
Unlike Mark, I mean, what I appreciate about Mark is, and what you and Jesse do, is that you don't take AI generated content and parade it as your own. You're very open that you're tinkering with AI as a toolkit. And I'm sure there are people who would disagree.
It's my voice, but it's the AI's words, because and it's a collaboration. What I was going to get to is last year, the summer of 2024, when we were going to do this, I thought this is kind of like the height of the trans movement. This is, and again, I don't want to spend too long on this, so I'm going to get through this and steamroll into the next thing. But I thought, what better time to address queer cinema, trans cinema, than last summer? Then the world changed. And
did it?
and I want to be very specific about what I'm trying to get across here. Doing something at the height of people's being aware of it is one thing, and I think there's a degree of bravery that goes along with that, but not nearly as much bravery as doing things at the height of its condemnation. At the height of its people having a backlash against it.
Mhm.
And the world changed. We don't need to discuss what or how or why, but now there is such a backlash against the trans community. Actually, I just did a TikTok today about Brittany Griner, and one of the things the haters say about her is that she's a man baby, and I was like, can we not do stuff like that? Like, there's plenty of real things to criticize this woman about. Can we not make things up? It reminded me of the Obama birth certificate stuff, but that's a whole other podcast. My point is that I think doing this now in the face of all of the backlash that's happening politically and culturally against the trans community is actually makes this podcast that much more important for the little space we
Here's,
occupy. I'm not saying we are like this big voice in the community. I'm saying I'm happier we're doing it. I'm happier it worked out now that we're doing it as opposed to last summer. I think it's more significant now than it was last summer.
I need to stop you for a second before
Mhm.
you use this term again. Backlash. Backlash tends to refer to consequences of something that somebody did very intentionally. Someone want to tell me what the fuck the trans community did to cause backlash aside from exist and insist on give us equal rights and then please leave us the fuck alone like you would anyone else?
Well said and noted.
Did I miss something?
Well said and noted.
I'm not mean to come off as snippy as you, but like I said, my for one thing, my
Well
kid
said and noted
is
means we're
my
going to
kid is
move on,
trans.
Sean.
Okay, but
You
all
were
right.
heard. So,
Sorry.
this Pride Month, we are celebrating the flamboyant, fearless, and fiercely important legacies of three trailblazing films.
Yes.
The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, 1994. To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, 1995. And Hedwig and the Angry Inch, 2001. While each tells its own unique story, from a desert drag road trip across the Australian outback to a heartfelt exploration of gender identity through glam rock cabaret, they are all interconnected by the historical arc of queer visibility in cinema. These films didn't just showcase LGBTQ plus characters, they centered them in eras where that was still an act of rebellion. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Priscilla broke ground internationally, putting Australian queer cinema on the global map and normalizing drag culture long before RuPaul's Drag Race made it mainstream. Just 1 year later, To Wong Foo introduced Middle America to drag queens with heart, humor, and dignity, starring mainstream Hollywood actors like Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo at the height of their careers. Then came Hedwig, a deeply personal indie musical about gender trauma and artistic expression, which has since become a cult favorite and a cornerstone of trans representation in modern film and theater. Together, these films reflect the evolution of queer and trans narratives, from coded subtext to full-throated declarations of identity and humanity. More than just products of their time, these movies pushed culture forward. They asked audiences to look beyond binary norms and embrace love, transformation, and self-expression in all forms. Whether through sequins, ballads, or beat-up buses, these stories assert loudly and proudly that queer people, drag performers, and trans individuals deserve joy, complexity, and a place in the cinematic canon. And as we revisit them in 2025, their messages feel just as urgent, defiant, and beautiful as ever. Your thoughts before we get into Priscilla?
My thoughts are pretty much, and again, I'm sorry if I got a little bit heated earlier. My thoughts are you chose three absolutely superb movies. You indeed chose three cornerstones, three iconic films that in some way or another were bolder than, for each of them, were bolder than they had any right being, considering when they came out. And that is to say, To Wong Foo was a product of the 90s. The heyday of Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. When we thought that was a character that was going to endure for generations. Hedwig, as I recall, was a product of the mid 2000s when things had advanced, but the pushback was also really beginning. And I believe somewhere in between, you had The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which I've heard a few people refer to Wong Foo as kind of a knockoff of.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of it's weird because that intro it took
mhm,
a couple of tries for the AI to get really what I was going for because this to me does feel like an evolution. It kind of,
mhm.
especially not so much with Hedwig, but with Priscilla and Tu Wong Fu, and then we'll get into Priscilla. It kind of feels like the Eddie Izzard thing of if you ever have like, and he was talking about British film, but if you have a British film, that does any bit of, I'm kind of halfway doing Eddie Izzard now. If you have a British film that does any bit of business in the and then it has to be remade in the United States, but they always have to up the ante. They always have, it's like he does the impression. I was like a guy in a room is like, "Hello, I don't know, I guess I better go now. Well, I guess you might, and then it's like, and then he does the same film in America. And he's like, "Hey, you fuck my wife, you fuck my wife, you fuck." It just goes on and on and on. And that's just to a degree that's true. Priscilla feels like this really straightforward, very heartfelt story that got Americanized by with Tu Wong Fu. And I don't think their hearts were in a bad place. I just think they were like, let's take the essence of what Priscilla was doing and do it again, but for
Yeah,
an American audience, which is distinctly different from the Australian
yeah,
audience.
I really had that backwards, and I apologize. My brain just
Hmm.
blipped for a moment. No, you're absolutely right. Tu Wong Fu was considered to be a campy bootleg
Yeah.
of Priscilla, when really they feel like such very different movies because very different places. I mean, just because you're
They
talking
had
about the great,
they had two different thematic
I was
narratives.
gonna, yeah.
So, all right. So, The Adventures of Priscilla,
Mhm,
Queen of the Desert, once again, is a 1994 Australian road comedy written and directed by Stephen Elliott.
mhm.
Um, it the film was based upon the lives of three actual drag queens: Cindy Pestel, Stryker Meyer, and Lady Bump, who were to play themselves but later replaced with what the studio considered bankable actors. It stars, believe it or not, Hugo Weaving, Elrond from Lord of the Rings, and Mr. Smith. Guy Pearce, the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, and you should see him in The Brutalist. And Terrence Stamp, and if you don't know who Terrence Stamp is, go watch Superman 2. He's Zod.
Zod.
Zod is a transgender person is my new favorite thing in 2025. That being said, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert premiered at the 1994 Cannes Film Festival in the Uncertain Regard section. Upon its wide release, it became a surprise worldwide hit, and its positive portrayal of LGBT individuals helped to introduce queer themes to a mainstream audience. It received predominantly positive reviews and won Best Costume Design at the 67th Academy Awards. The film is only one of 3 films set in contemporary times to win the award for Best Costume Design. It became a cult classic both in Australia and abroad. The film provided the basis for a musical, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which opened in 2006 in Sydney. It had a U.S. budget of $1,375,000. It made almost $30 million. So, very, very successful movie. Before I get into the plot, just really quick, had you seen it before you prepped for this podcast, or what's your history
No,
with the film?
I was aware of it, but it had really been on my list for a very, very long time
Mm-hmm.
as one of the hallmarks of queer cinema that I had meant to take in. I knew that, and I knew that it preceded To Wong Fu, and that was very much a part of Tu Wong Fu's really kind of sometimes undeserved snubbing by some people. But really, I wasn't prepared. I think it's obviously a very funny movie. It's hilarious, but I wasn't prepared for how much more grounded and earthy
Yeah.
it was going to be.
I didn't see it. I was a high school senior in 1994. I was aware of it because I was a film snob and it made its way around film people. We were the original film chads, and my friend was the original Green Day fan, but that's another story. So I was aware of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I never watched it, and I'm gonna look. You know me. I'm hardcore. I'll take y'all on. You want to fight me, bro? Let's fight. I was not interested in drag culture, not even a little bit. So I knew it was out there. People said it was good. For the same reason I didn't watch Wong Foo when it came out, I didn't care about the subject matter. So I'd never seen it. I watched it last year when we were originally going to do this. And I don't know if it was the environment that I watched it in or the mood I was in at the time. I'm in a different mental health state these days. But I liked the movie, but it didn't quite touch me the way that the second rewatch did. I watched it this past week in preparation for tonight. It's now become one of my top favorite movies. This is an amazing piece of film. And I think when I had to focus on it and be in a better headspace, I could appreciate what it was. So what is it? Let's get into... Where are you? Let's get into what this is. All right. So the plot goes like this. Mitzi Delbras, a.k.a. Tick, a Sydney-based drag queen, recruits two friends, Bernadette, a transgender woman and retired performer, and the young and flamboyant Felicia, to join him on a road trip across the Australian outback. Their mission, a weeks-long journey aboard a broken-down lavender tour bus named Priscilla, to perform at a casino resort in the middle of nowhere, owned by Tick's estranged wife. Along the way, the trio encounters hostile locals, mechanical issues, small-town oddballs, and moments of breathtaking beauty. The real heart of the film lies in the camaraderie, conflict, and emotional vulnerability between the queens as they confront prejudice, grief, and identity. The film culminates in a heartfelt reunion between Tick and his young son, who fully accepts his father's drag persona, underscoring the film's core message of love, acceptance, and chosen family. All right, Sean. Lights, camera, action, baby. Pick up your feather boa and give us a twirl. What'd you think of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert?
Well, I can't say I've had a whole lot of exposure to Australian cinema. Aside, I mean, literally about the only other one that I can think of that's coming to mind was the original Mad Max. That is it. But what's impressed me in both is that it's not that Priscilla is not without its colorful moments. You can't authentically depict drag culture without bombast. It cannot be done and should never be attempted. It's a disservice to the entire community. But beneath all that, where it feels like Wong Foo is really dressing its message up in camp, Priscilla is not only wowing you with the vibrancy and the color of drag at its best, but it's layering that by humanizing it more than I think Wong Foo ever does, or at least more sincerely and without needing to kind of be cut up to release the tension. Because you're almost always going to find in even those funny moments that that what people are feeling underneath is very, very real. Trying to think of what even the best example from the movie would be, because there's so many. I think kind of about how Felicia getting locked out of the bus by the other queens, and how while you're watching him, of course, just dancing around and being an absolute ass, so they'll let him back in, you can also kind of see the exasperation of these elder queens with this younger one who just can't seem to.
I have to tell you,
tone it down at all.
Terrence Stamp's character is my fucking spirit animal. Just exasperated with all of them. That I'm not cutting you off. I'm going to let you continue, but I have to hit this one point. the bit at the beginning where Tick and Felicia are talking, and it's all, big dicks and vaginas and sex, and it's just the most crass, catty conversation. And there's Terrence Stamp driving the bus, just going, "Is there any way we cannot talk about dicks and vaginas and sex and squirting and all this? Can we please talk about something else?" And Felicia just looks at him and is like, "What else is there? What would you like us to talk about?" But I have been Terrence Stamp in that moment. It's great.
Yeah. What else can I throw? I would definitely throw in the bar scene where the trio is performing on top of the bar. The
Mhm.
mail order bride, they've been told very specifically, is not to be allowed anywhere near alcohol. And she comes along, literally steals the entire show by popping ping pong balls in her pussy and testing what the fall off range on them is when they start to lose velocity across the room. And while yes, it's hilarious, especially since the reactions of Terrence Stamp and the absolute horror on the faces of Terrence Stamp and Hugo Weaving and Guy Pearce are just absolutely fucking phenomenal. But at the same time, I don't know if it was intended or not. It feels like part of it rings a little bit with kind of that commentary on straight people kind of loudly penetrating queer spaces where we are of our various tribes allowed to just be who we are without fear or paranoia, and just kind of noisily and obliviously just shoving us off to the side with their shit. When really these kind of become our spaces, or in this case, the trio kind of has to just kind of make space wherever they can.
Yeah.
Where it kind of feels like, Jesus fuck, we made this space so we could get away from you and just be to ourselves because you clearly didn't want us anywhere. And now we can't even get rid of you here. It almost, for me anyway, and again, I do not pretend to speak for every member of the queer community, especially no one in the trans community, except maybe my kid. But that is kind of what it can feel like. When you're just being that noisily shoved out.
So I want to talk about this element of it. What I like about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, is that it wasn't about drag culture. Drag
No.
culture plays a part of it because we have three drag queens who are our main protagonists. But it's not the road picture is not to show you the ins and outs of drag culture. What this really is it's mostly about Tick's journey. But obviously Felicia and Bernadette's arc, they have arcs too, and I'm going to get to those in a minute. But I think the reason why it's reaching me now, and it wouldn't have reached me as a kid, and in 1994 I was still a kid, and it didn't reach me last year, was Tick's personal journey of being okay with himself, but kind of seeing himself through the lens of how other people see drag and queer people, and feeling a sense of shame, not for what he is, but for what he is to his child. He's very, because for the most part, much of the movie, you're dealing with a lot of other stuff that's going on, but occasionally in the quiet moments of the movie, you hear Tick don't talk about my son, don't talk about my wife, don't talk about my family. And it's not that he's ashamed of them, it's that he's not so much his wife, his ex-wife, but he's more afraid of, and hear me when I say this, I'm trying to describe this character's point of view, not my own.
Okay.
He's sort of projecting his anxiety onto his son in absentia and essentially saying, will my son accept me? Through the eyes of this child, will I be shown to be a monster of some kind? Will I be shown to be abnormal? Will this child love me? Am I lovable? In this state, in my natural state, in the place that I want to be in my own skin. And when the kid couldn't care less, the kid accepts him. The kid just wants his dad. And when he realizes that this isn't about a child and a drag queen, it's about a father and a son. And that's what it is for the kid, which is what the wife had been telling him all along. I was like, that's a really great message. That at the end of the day, we're all kind of people first. And that we have other identities like dad, son, spouse that are equally as important as our cultural or sexual identity. That's the part of the movie that that's part of it, of the movie that I really keyed into. I love Tick's journey. And then his realization and his bond with his kid at the end. And then to a slightly lesser extent, Felicia has a really rough go of it. Almost sexually assaulted in one scene, and just the whole road trip, just sort of wrestling with his sense of self, and wanting to be flamboyant and attention seeking, and being okay with this, and then having to suffer the consequences of when you do that in certain places. And then he has also a moment with the son. The son's a great character in the sense, because the son doesn't see this outwardly flamboyant, attention-seeking character. He just sees Felicia. He just sees Guy Pearce. And he just, in a simple sentence like, do you want to come play? I've got Legos. It just, stripping Felicia down of everything but like the bare human essence of who that person is, and saying, you are okay. You seem like a fun person to be around. None of this stuff really matters as such. Like, that's great. And so I get this out before we lose track of the conversation, or I forget to say it. What I love about Bernadette's story, what I love about Terrence Stamp is, that's why I mentioned the comment on the bus, is that being a trans person for that character is a deeply personal thing, but it's not their entire identity.
No.
Trans is, a state of changing the circumstances of your birth so that you are comfortable in your own skin and are able to walk through life and be the best version of yourself you can be. And that's a part of it, but it's not the whole thing. This should sound like a reoccurring theme. And he like somewhat rejects some of the gay drag culture. That's what he's talking about in the scene on the bus. He's like, oh my God, is this all we are? Is this it? And like this whole thing with his journey was feeling utterly disconnected from that world, but that world is still a part of him. And God, do I know what it feels like to be a part of a culture and also feel isolated from it? To feel like you've outgrown the people and the culture that are deeply intrinsic to your personality. It's never more of an isolating, God, I know someone knows exactly how this feels. Never more of an isolating feeling to feel like you don't belong in the culture you belong in.
I have felt I have felt that a lot over the last 9 years. More and more.
So yeah, it comes with age.
Yeah.
So but that's the thing. That's why I love the Terrence Stamp character. That's why I love Bernadette. Is just because I'm trans doesn't mean I accept all of this. Just because I'm trans doesn't mean I'm all the way with you all the time. That's why I love the conflict between Bernadette and Felicia, because you've got kind of the old head and the young head just kind of banging heads. And it would be low-hanging fruit and just sort of a throwaway thing to be like, well, you're both gay and you're both trans and you're both, drag and you're both this and you're both that. So you're all the same. They're not. They're two different people in two different places in life with two different philosophies, both tempered by their ages and experiences. That's all in this movie. What makes it great is that everything I've been talking about for the past 5-10 minutes is all there in the text, the supertext, and the subtext. With a keen eye, you can watch this and appreciate it on so many levels. And if you strip it away and deconstruct it, it's a road trip. It's yet another road trip movie of outsiders traipsing along a trail full of places where they don't fit in. And they get to a place and they leave it better than when they started, which is a big part of the next movie we're going to talk about, an even bigger part of Wong Foo, but we'll get there when we get there. So, there's not a lot of deep, meaningful conversation necessarily between the characters as such, but some of the things that the characters say about their state of mind and how they're feeling and what they're doing, and then some of the actions that take place. Like again, when Felicia's feeling like I can't just. It is not me. Something that's actually said also into Wong Foo. To be dragged, to be this way, is to be loud and to force people to reckon with you.
Mhm.
And I can't just sit in a hotel being afraid of the world. I'm not being my best self if I do that. And but then you have to reckon with a world that is forcefully and violently not going to deal with you.
Yeah.
And where did it, and the movie the question the movie asks is, where exactly is the line between living your best self and self-preservation? And those two things are at loggerheads throughout a lot of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. And it's a great movie. It also cinematically, from a cinematography point of view, what a gorgeous movie this is. My God, I don't want to go to the Australian outback. I feel like I'll die, preferably by Lord Humongous. But but from a picturesque point of view, the Australian outback is just wonderful. All right, I'm going to give you the last word here on Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and then we'll move on. But I threw a lot out there. Maybe some things for you to think about or respond to.
Okay. First off, wholeheartedly, I completely agree. As indie cinema goes, especially in the 90s, it is above and beyond in terms of craft, in my opinion. You're welcome to disagree. I'm obviously not comparing it to the major studio blockbusters of the time, but compared to what was, I think, could be called kind of a nascent era for indie cinema, or maybe just even kind of one of sea change, if not nascent. Um, it looks better than it has any right to on that kind of budget. My hat's absolutely off. But in
Doesn't
terms,
look like an indie film for an indie film. It's really weird.
no, not even. If I had to compare its quality to anything, I would compare it maybe almost to Robert Rodriguez,
Sure.
and his kind of very real DIY, kind of go to war with the army that you have kind of aesthetic that he had at the time, towards I'll make the movie that I want to make however I have to, whatever strings I pull, and he somehow pulled it off. That's kind of how this feels at times. But you also, in terms of kind of talking about it rhetorically, just kind of graze on a couple things I want to touch on real quick. You talked about how it's a movie about Tick's family. I only slightly disagree, and that is, I feel like it's a story about a collision of families.
Okay.
And it's one that many a queer person has to reckon with at some point. And that is, you can hang on a sec, and get some off the floor there. You see the bond that he ultimately has with his wife and son. And by the way, kudos for his wife being absolutely nothing less than respectful, loving, and supportive.
Yes.
Just from the off.
Her problems with him were not that he was queer or drag. Her problems was, I have been mothering this child solo for too long. Your turn. The cry of the cry of many a mother. Yeah, do your part. Come on,
Yeah,
step up.
yeah.
Pick up your end of the couch.
Yeah, queer people, they're just like us. But and the fact that I love that his son just could not give a fig that dad is a drag queen.
Yeah.
Just could not. He cares about what he needs to care about, and that's it. Everything else stops there. But you
One
also
second.
have that
Give me one half a second. Al Jorgensen was asked in an interview, what does your kid think about you being Al Jorgensen of Ministry? And Al said, doesn't give a fuck. I'm just dad. That's the essence of what we're talking about.
Exactly. But you've got the collision of that family. And it's not even a messy collision. It's just a meeting of worlds more than anything else.
Yeah.
A coalescence, so to speak, of that with companions who are messy as their relationship might be, as all unhappy families are according to Tolstoy in their own unique way. You've got his found family, his chosen family, Bernadette and Felicia, and it is very much two elder queers kind of mothering um mothering a baby drag queen. And like all families do, they bicker incessantly. They know exactly which buttons to push for each other to really get them going, and they do not stop. But when everything comes down and shit is getting ugly, particularly when Felicia is very nearly sexually assaulted, um, all other priorities rescinded. They are there. They're there without question, without reservation, without apology for everything else that came first. They definitely do rag Felicia Felicia when she's too busted up to say a fucking word about it.
Well, it's
But
funny. I gotta poke in here because you
sure.
talk about, just briefly. You talk about like the the LGBTQI community are humans first, and they act just like every other human does,
Mhm.
down to verbally abusing each other. And
Oh,
specifically,
of
I'm talking
course.
about like, well, there's a lot of, and I don't want to go off on a tangent here, and I don't want to invite a tangent, but there's a lot of wrangling over words right now in our culture and meaning,
Okay.
and people getting very, very quick to lose sight of the central conversation because you said something, you said a thing wrong. But what I'm getting at is the inherent sort of biting uh, insults and demeaning, even among quote unquote sane people. The specific incident I'm referring to in the film, which is all that matters right now in this conversation, is out of anger and frustration and disappointment, Felicia dead names Bernadette. Like if
Yes, that
you
part.
dead name
Yeah.
somebody, and it's like, to some people it's you use the N word or something, and then it's like, they're just as, the point of that scene is they're just as likely to do it to each other for all the
It's
wrong reasons other people do it to them.
Well, it's
You know?
it's bad enough when straight people do it.
Right.
It's forgivable sometimes when it's accidental, but then you get the ones who are trying to make a point for
Right.
some reason. If you're another queer person and you're doing it, it's so much less forgivable because you are expected to fucking know better. It's right up there with you don't out another
Yeah.
gay because you don't know why they might still be in the
Yeah.
closet.
That's why I wanted
But
to draw a circle around that, because it's such an important, it's a detail
oh,
you'll miss
totally.
it if you don't realize just how weighty that moment was.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was very, very. That was going right to live rounds. That was going to nuclear options pretty much right
Yeah.
away, and with no call for it. But to get to the second thing that I wanted to point out, just as briefly as I'm able to, is you mentioned Bernadette kind of bemoaning the spectacle around her as, is this all we are?
Yeah.
In a way, that kind of harkens to one of my favorite things about the whole movie, and that is the fact that it is LGBT cinema where your gays are just allowed to live and they're human beings, where they're not necessarily reclaiming caricatures or tropes or jingoism. Um, but it's just the fact that our heroes get to just live, not be reduced to their sexuality, and just enjoy a road trip, but to do it in their own way, in a way that is relatable to the gay experience, and how that identity can indeed shape every little thing that you do. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine earlier today over coffee. My good buddy Lance, who was the officiant for mine and Anne's wedding, um, and one of the first people that I came out to. And it's refreshing to see a movie where we not only get to have the happy ending, but we get to see a pretty honest, authentic depiction of what it indeed could very conceivably be like if you just sent three drag queens on a road trip. It's one that feels like us, not so much like someone's cartoonish interpretation or self parody of who we are. Um, it's not a drag movie. It's a road trip movie with drag queens. But the thing is, for its time, even that was revolutionary.
Sure. I don't want to, again, I want to get to the next movie, so we're going to. So I'm going to say this and then we're moving on.
Sure.
The thing about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, is it's talking about what many would say was at least at one time a subculture. It was a subculture celebrated and participated in by adults late nights in dark corners of the world. It was, it was something that, like, this is something that older, mature people get to enjoy. Older, mature people get to participate in. This is something left for the 21 and over crowd. And over time, it's become one of the things where people like this should be an integrated part of life, not just a subculture only celebrated by adults in dark corners at late nights. And I'm not going to have that debate, and I'm not going to entertain that debate. I'm saying where Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is brave is it's one of those pictures that took all of that and said, well, what if we spotlight it in a very mainstream way? Even though it's an indie film, even though it was a foreign film, if you're from America, it's still as close to shining a bright light on it as you were going to get in 1994.
Well, allow me to segue a little bit into talking about were we going to talk about Tu Wong Fu next?
Sure were.
Okay. Well, then allow me to segue into it. I think that's one of the biggest differences is the fact that I think it's easy as American film fans to forget that our cinema is really pretty unique globally. There really is no other country that is making movies quite like ours, because no one else really has audiences quite like ours. And so I think that was probably one of the things that was paramount when they were developing Tu Wong Fu, was the idea of we somehow need to sell this to American audiences.
Yes.
And even though we have three of the most proven bankable stars of our era that we can get right now, four as long as we're throwing Robin Williams into the mix, albeit in a brief cameo role, but we have to somehow make this more entertaining because just authentically portrayed drag queens on a road trip is not going to cut it at the box office. And goddamn, miracle of miracles, they found a way to not only do it, but they found a way to do it while giving it its own soul and still saying so many precious, valuable things with that spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down.
Tu Wong Fu, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar, the only real Catwoman, is a 1995 American road trip comedy drama film directed by Beeben Kidron, starring White Men Can't Jump's Wesley Snipes, Roadhouse's Patrick Swayze, and John Leguizamo as three New York City drag queens who embark on a road trip. Its title refers to an iconic autograph photo of Julie Newmar they carry with them on their journey. Newmar also has a cameo appearance in the film, right at the very end. She walks in and she asks the three drag queens if they've heard of the Avengers initiative. The film was released in the U.S. on September 8th, 1995, and held the #1 spot at the North American box office for 2 weeks, with a worldwide gross of $47.8 million. Critical response was mixed, as you could imagine, with particular criticism towards the plot and its familiar elements. But the performances of Swayze, Snipes, and Leguizamo were lauded. Yeah, I'm gonna like gush over Leguizamo in this movie. At the 53rd Golden Globe Award, Swayze was nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Actor, Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. Leguizamo was nominated for Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, Motion Picture. World Golf Hall of Fame member Juan Antonio Chichi Rodriguez sued Universal Pictures for defamation, especially involving the use of his name in the film, eventually settling on undisclosed terms. So yeah, it was a $30 million movie. It did not do tremendously well by modern standards. It only made $47.8 million, which is
no surprise there.
Yeah. The film was nominated for Outstanding Film at the 1996 GLAAD Media Awards. Tu Wong Foo is considered groundbreaking for being the first mainstream Hollywood production to depict drag queens. Rita Kempley of the Washington Post wrote that in comparison to previous films that featured cross-dressing like Some Like It Hot or Tootsie, the heroines in Tu Wong Foo aren't cross-dressing to escape the mob or to prove a point. They're just being true to their nature. And I'm not going to, there's a whole thing on here about this, but I'm going to leave it there. Everything I said about Priscilla, I will say yet again about Tu Wong Foo. Very much aware of this film at the time. Couldn't have cared less about the subject matter. Didn't see it until I watched it for this podcast. I watched it last year. It was funny because last year was also the Roadhouse remake, so I had to watch Roadhouse for the first time. And it's so funny because like I'm now realizing how little Patrick Swayze I've watched over the years. And when
you're right.
What an interesting actor he is. Like I saw Ghost when it came out, but like I didn't see Roadhouse. I didn't see Tu Wong Foo, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of Patrick Swayze I just completely ignored.
To be honest, I had only seen. Well, yeah, there was Roadhouse for the review last year, but other than that, I had seen Donnie Darko. I think I had tolerated exactly one viewing each of Ghost and Dirty Dancing.
Yeah, Dirty Dancing I saw when it came out.
Sean thought he was straight at the time. It was a different time. Onions on my belt and everything. But I couldn't really appreciate it for what it was as a straight man. This is one of those movies that I almost want to say I regret waiting so long to see it, but at the same time, I absolutely know there was no way I would have fallen in love with it if I had first seen it any other time except for when I did.
My son watches a lot of the same movies I watch for these podcasts. Some of them he can't. He's too young, and I refuse to let him. But there are other movies where I'm like, no, you're fine. This is fine. This was one he bowed out of. Because he asked me the other night. Yeah, he asked me. He's 11. He asked me the other night, and he goes, do you have your second job tonight? Can we watch a movie? And I said, well, Wednesday night I don't. Wednesday night I'm all clear. And he was like, okay, well, what movies do you have? And he already knows how to get me. He's like, well, what movies do you have to watch for your podcast? Because I'll watch them with you. I'm like, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Tu Wong Foo. Thank you for everything, Julie Newmar, and Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And he went, fuck. I did this joke on.
Did he actually say fuck?
No, I make my kids sound a lot filthier than they really are. For laughs. But I did this joke on Monday where I looked at him. And I saw in his eyes his mother as he said to me, Father, does everything have to be about your stupid podcast? And so we ended up watching The Critic instead.
Cold.
That is my son. I accept that about him. He's preparing himself. He's putting on his war paint and his armor for the world that lies ahead of him. In any case, yeah. So I did not watch these with him. And the only point of me bringing that up, and then I'm going to get into the plot synopsis, is I don't think, despite the fact that his sister is firmly entrenched in this community, I don't think he can truly. There are certain movies that are made for adults but can be watched and appreciated by children on a different level. I'm not entirely sure any of these three fit that bill. I think to truly appreciate what people are going after here, you kind of have. Listen to what I'm really saying and not what you think I'm saying.
No, I'm listening.
These are movies where, and Robert and I have talked about this, they can only be truly appreciated by people who have lived. When you have lived a life, when you've had some shit happen to you, when you have wisdom and experience and scars and burns, you can look at a piece of cinema, you can look at a piece of art and go, okay, I identify with this. Not because it's drag or it's this or it's that or it's black or it's white or it's Irish, but I identify with what these people are going through because I have also walked that kind of journey.
It can be anything. I had that
Yeah.
experience. I've been playing the third game in the Wolfenstein Alt History saga lately, and there was a part in the first about 45 minutes of the game, a flashback sequence, that the very first time I played it, I got through that sequence and I had to shut the game off and go decompress for a while because it hit so close to home with things that I grew up hearing in my household and a very certain environment that I that shaped me in some ways that I still don't talk about too openly.
So do I think he could
Um,
have gotten something out of the experience? Yeah,
so
probably. He's a smart
yeah.
kid. These are good movies to one degree or another. But does he have the life experience to truly appreciate the essence of what these films are
No,
about? No. And that's why I
no.
was like, I'm not going to force these on you. You live. Come back to me in 20 years. All right. So speaking of 20 years, to Wong Foo, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. When Noxzema, which is a hilarious name, Noxzema Jackson in Vita Boheme win a New York drag pageant, they tie for the crown and decide to take a cross-country road trip to Hollywood, bringing along a shy newcomer named Chichi Rodriguez. The plan takes a turn when their car breaks down in a conservative rural town. Stranded for the weekend, the Queens slowly win over the initially skeptical locals with their kindness, fashion sense, and life advice. Vita, in particular, helps a local woman escape domestic abuse. By the way, again, Stalker Channing, who, like, I only thought she was Rizzo in Greece. Who knew she had a whole career? Well, Chi-Chi finds romance. The townspeople ultimately embrace their fabulous visitors, even defending them against a homophobic police officer. The film ends with the Queens moving on toward their next adventure, but not before leaving the town changed for the better. To Wong Foo is less about glamour and more about impact, how visibility and decency can shift hearts even in America's most conservative corners. Yeah, the essence of this movie is strangers come into a town and leave it better than they found it. Tale as
Hmm.
old as time. What did you think? And I know you have some. There was something very
Yes.
specific you wanted to get to with this movie. So go ahead and then go into your craft review.
Yes. Part that I briefly warned you about earlier. So here it goes. Of course, if you're watching this, the four easily highest profile stars of this movie are four, correction, three straight men and one who tragically, posthumously, we'd later learn was bisexual. But I'm going to keep in mind at the time that, as far as we knew, Robin Williams was straight. I believe, if I understand correctly, his daughter Zelda has since confirmed, yes, he was bi. But otherwise, you have John Leguizamo, Patrick Swayze, and Wesley Snipes. And I am 99% of the time, yes, a firm believer that the most deserving performers to play queer roles are queer actors because there are elements of our day to day lives, our identities, our upbringings, our tragedies and triumphs that we can bring to playing members of our community that straight people, with all due respect, even the staunchest ally, will never 100% understand ever because they haven't lived it. I learned that after living 30 plus years of my life as a straight man and then coming out when I realized, no, I am absolutely not straight and I probably never really was. Um, but there are performers, rare ones, the exceptions that prove the rule, that take these roles on and earn respect for the respect with which they treat our community, our stories, our characters, And they do their absolute damnedest to bring as much genuine gravitas and authenticity to those roles as possible, according to our experiences. And again, they're rare. I would give Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger all the credit in the world. They did it. Robin Williams, again, keep in mind, we thought he was straight at the time, but among the community, and I was talking about this with my friend Lance earlier, the same friend, there was always a sense of he's a little too good at this. Ain't no way. But at the same time, you have Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo. Three men who absolutely did right by the community every step. And it bears noting, Patrick Swayze grew up in a more artistic kind of background that I think he gets credit for because of roles like Roadhouse. I'm told that a football coach once signed him up for ballet training because he lacked any coordination, any grace, and part of it just kind of stuck with him as an artist. I don't know as much about how John Leguizamo grew up, but again, I will say this about both of them. I think Swayze was a phenomenally gifted performer who was unfortunately pigeonholed by his most iconic roles at times. That is prior to him making especially Ghost and Donnie Darko. I don't believe John Leguizamo has ever fully gotten his flowers for just what a phenomenal actor with so much range and so much charisma as he is. But the big one for me is Wesley Snipes because he's known as the action guy. He's known for Blade, Passenger 57. Let's go ahead and throw New Jack City in there. You mentioned, of course, White Men Can't Jump, but he doesn't necessarily get remembered as much for White Men Can't Jump as he does for Blade. He doesn't get remembered for Tu Wong Foo as much as he does for New Jack City or Passenger 57. And quite frankly, that's fucking bullshit because he brings it with so much nonstop immersion, charisma, and flat fucking out humor. But here's the other thing.
One sec. I'm going to put something on the screen. Just laugh at it and keep going. Alrighty then.
I ain't saying a word. Anyway.
Hey, while you're taking a breath, I'm going to raise one counterpoint, just so people are just like, why doesn't Mark push back on this when he pushes back on everything else? So I'm going to push back on your argument because I don't agree with it. Here are my pieces of evidence to submit to the court, and then I'm going to give you your last words, and then we move on to the plot synopsis. Acting is acting. I don't particularly care what your background is. I think if you are the best actor for that role, man or woman, gay or straight, white or black, then that's outside unless you're playing a specifically historical figure where the race matters, nothing matters. What matters is talent. And I'm going to give you two examples of straight men who played gay men who I couldn't imagine anyone else playing these characters. And I think if they had, we'd have lost a treasure. Everyone take out your drinking glass because this is now the Radulich and Broadcasting drinking game. The Wire. Mark mentions The Wire. Take a drink. I'm just going to read straight from Google Gemini. Michael K. Williams did not identify as gay himself. He famously played the gay character Omar Little on the critically acclaimed series The Wire, and while he was initially apprehensive about portraying the character due to societal stereotypes, he ultimately embraced the role. He even advocated for more intimate gay scenes for Omar, according to Entertainment Weekly. Williams later spoke about the importance of his portrayal of queer characters, recognizing their significance within the broader narrative of Black and LGBTQI+ identity. The other one that came to mind was Eric Stonestreet. He played the gay character in Modern Family, Cam, and he's lightheartedly described himself as openly straight. Oddly enough, his co-star and on-screen husband, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, who is actually gay for real life, jokingly called him gay for pay. So again, two really, I think, excellent examples of being blind to identity and just open to ability.
Yes, they are, but they're also exceptions that prove the rule. Again, I didn't say that no straight act. I said there's a reason I said 99% of the time this is what I believe. Yes, I would absolutely give you Eric Stone Street in a heartbeat. I've never seen The Wire. I take your word for it on that.
You've never
But
seen
a
The
lot of
Wire?
Mark, you got to remember, a lot of my life the last few years has been like Captain America coming out of the ice, been trying to play catch up. But the thing is, a lot of my opinion of that also comes from the fact that for years you had Hollywood turning to cishet actors first, whereas you had gay actors for whom the only work they could get was playing the fucking caricatures, was playing Hollywood's insultingly, infuriatingly reductive versions of queer people. And so yeah, it has sometimes been galling for them to sit back and go, I could have brought so much to this character that this a straight man or woman wouldn't even begin to consider. But I couldn't even get in the room for an audition because they immediately just went straight to him or her. It was one of the reasons there was so much pushback against Scarlett Johansson when she said as much about playing a trans character. When there are so many trans actors out there going, I'm right here. I'm free for the next however many months you might hear me. You pay me enough, I'll clear the next 12 for you. But the other thing I want to bring up about Wesley, and it's a subtle thing that not as many people notice, but I think it's one of the best indicators of what a great performance that he gave, was the moment when they first arrive in Snyderville. And you can see it in his eyes, in the way he is just looking around, clocking everybody. You can see that it's equal parts, I'm a black man in a sundown town, and I'm a drag queen out in the country. And something that is common to both of them, and I can now say this having experience. I experience it actually every day at work, is the fact that, especially if you live in the Midwest, in a state like Missouri, and you are a queer person, almost every public location you're walking into, you become Jason fucking Bourne. You are instantly looking around. You're taking stock of the crowd. You want to know where the exits are, because this is what we have to live with every single day. And even those of us who are very hetero passing, hiya. There's the integral calculus that we have to go through before we talk to almost any member of the same sex, because yeah, gay panic is real, and it's something that we all have to be afraid of, because we've been given cause to. Because yeah, I know not all straight people, but we're at the point where almost every queer person has got a story about a straight person or a cis person. Someone walks into my store where I'm one of the older employees, and I especially work with a lot of high school and young college age, gay, lesbian, and gender queer people. Someone walks in with a MAGA hat or anything else that I associate with that fucking cult, I look forward to your comments. I am instantly keeping them out of the corner of my eye the entire time that I'm working, just in case, because it's happened, because it can happen in an instant, and it happens again and again. So Wesley doing that, it kind of was a moment where even if it was coming more from him being a black man in a white world than trying to portray a drag queen in the country, I still get it.
Yeah, there's a
I
lot
still
about
very much felt
Wesley's.
that.
There's a lot about Wesley being a gay drag black man in that area and the way he's portraying that character that is one of the things I really like about this movie. So let's talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, I've lost track of where we were here. What else? I for some odd reason I thought I didn't read the plot synopsis, but I did already. We've passed that point. Good. Did I read the? Yeah, I did. I read the plot synopsis, didn't I?
Yeah, you basically did.
Okay. Yeah, let me just get into the movie.
Oh wait, no. Well, you really didn't. But if you don't want to, I kind of understand. We can just kind of take plot points as they come up if you want to.
No, I read this. I know I read this out loud already. Okay, so my thoughts on this movie. Not as good as Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but let me say this. This movie, the best thing about it is its performances. And the best performer in this, in my opinion, is John Leguizamo. We talk about actors just being lost in the makeup, lost in the costume, and John Leguizamo completely disappeared into that character.
Oh,
I did not see John, and it's not because he was dressed up as a girl. It's because his persona, his performance is transformative. It's
one of his hallmarks as an actor. He does it and makes it look so fucking easy.
He's really a chameleon. Whereas it's Wesley Snipes looks like a guy in a dress, which is fine. That happens. Some people are more transformative. Some very much look like, and I'm going to quote here.
Yeah, I give you that.
I'm going to quote Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, boy in a dress. Or actually, this movie, they say it several times, boy in a dress. Patrick Swayze, there are sometimes I lose him.
You forget you're watching Patrick Swayze.
And other times, it's very obvious you're watching Patrick Swayze. It kind of depends on how they have him dressed.
But I think the moments when Patrick Swayze comes out are the moments when they want you to glimpse Patrick Swayze underneath the drag for a very good reason.
I'm willing to buy that it's intentional. In any case, I think the difference between Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Wong Foo is it's two different presumptions about its audience. Priscilla doesn't care if you know what drag culture is. It's telling its story regardless. You either are on board or you're not. Mm-hmm. Wong Foo operates essentially in the first act as, hey, I don't know if you've ever seen drag culture before, but this is what drag culture is. And when this was like, here's how I'll describe it to you. Wong Foo in the first act comes across like a movie where they're taking the audience and the protagonist, the point of view character, to a fantasy land. And they have to explain the rules of Fantasyland to that character. The bit in the car, once they're on the road, and and Wesley Snipes does the monologue about the difference between gays, drags, trans, and as his word, transvestites, felt like an executive note that was, if you don't explain this to the cis white middle class audience, no one's gonna get it.
Well, now hold up a minute, player.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually worth explaining, though, because every single day I encounter a parade of straight people who still think those are strictly synonyms. And while I think the specific wording of it made sense for the era, but it wouldn't track as well today because the spectrum is much more fleshed out in terms of our understanding of it.
Let me counter that with, I hear what you're saying, but there's subtext, text, and supertext.
It was supertext.
It was
supertext. I'm not arguing
it
that
was all the subtlety of a donkey kick.
I
You
know.
know?
I'm not arguing that part. I'm not arguing that it's super
So
text.
my
What I
issue is
am,
not that it's there. It's my issue is it's how it was handled. It's a writing issue.
well, yeah, but I think it's one of the few writing issues in the movie that I could call genuinely clumsy because I
Hmm.
felt like everything else was really pretty well executed for what they were trying to do. They weren't going for the same kind of dry humor. It was Priscilla was drama with a splash of humor here and there, so that you can laugh just long enough sometimes,
Hmm.
maybe to keep from crying. Um, Tu Wong Fu doesn't have any pretense about that. The queens are absolutely cutting up. Yes, the story beats are predictable, but
Can we talk about like the gatekeeping that is a central part of this movie?
mm,
So again, that car ride is such an integral part of this movie, and if you blink, you'll miss it. That
mm,
whole first bit where they're doing "you're just a boy in a dress, but if you do X, Y, Z, then you can blossom into a full queen." And John Leguizamo's character's kind of like, "What the fuck? Stop telling me what I am and who I am."
but
And
the thing
what
is,
a
but
what a
Mark,
very real moment that felt like.
well,
That
yeah, it is real
That's
because
what I'm saying. Like,
it,
I'm not arguing with it.
yeah,
I'm saying that is something look, nerds do that to each other. You're not a real Star Wars fan. Like, and that's just a stupid thing as Star Wars fans. Imagine your gender identity being called into question, saying you're not a
mm,
real gender identity because you didn't hit these particular these particular
yeah.
bars.
Well,
And
Mark,
like,
let me
what a
let me
dehumanizing thing that is.
well, yeah, let me paint why that can be so dehumanizing and why they're taking something that can be and trying to paint it with a little bit of a lighter brush. And
Sure.
that's because for a lot of us, when we come out, part of the issue is you struggled enough to really learn to halfway love yourself, for when you thought you were straight, especially if you didn't realize you were queer very early in life. But then once you make that realization, you have to start over from scratch and you have to relearn to love yourself all over again, especially in those of us who are in light of something that we're taught makes you a defective human being in the eyes of everyone else. That is real. And also the tribalism within the queer community is very, very real. When
Yeah.
I came out, one of the reasons I held off for as long as I did, and I was so anxious about it, and I want to shout this amazing human being out right now, and that's Jeremy Thomas from 411 Mania. He has the distinction of being probably the second or third friend I came out to, and I was still homeless at the time, so I was already grappling with enough. But what I was terrified about was the fact that by knowing him and listening to other queer friends of mine, I was very aware that bi erasure was a thing. That there were, by all means, people within the queer community that if you weren't either 100% fucking strictly men or strictly women, as far as they were concerned, you didn't count. I was well aware of straight people and some of the criminally infuriating ways that they have treated bisexual and pansexual people in media. So that can be brutal because I didn't know who I was going to face. That if I came out to them, like, so you're a queer man, but you're in a straight facing relationship. So what you're saying is you're not really fucking queer because I knew that was a thing.
I
I mean,
gotta
hell, I
cut
I,
in
I
for
grew up
just
with,
1 second. You wait your whole life to feel like you fit in somewhere, only to be
huh?
betrayed. And you found that you
Exactly.
don't fit in. It's like, what is
Yes.
there ever a point where I can just relax and stand on terra firma? And it's like God keeps
Well,
saying,
and
no, it's always going to be sinking ground.
and here's the thing. I'm trying to navigate this at the time as a cisgender, straight passing white man.
Hmm.
Imagine what that is like if you're also a member of another marginalized community. And the white people have already pigeonholed or outright rejected you. And now you have given your own community that you were born into that is rejecting you too because you don't fit their culture either. This is why found families are such a big thing.
Oh, people ask me all
And
the time why I choose to work from home now and I don't leave the house much. Everything you just said.
and again, I'm grappling with all this, and Jeremy Thomas,
Hmm.
bless them for the rest of their lives onwards. One of the best friends I have ever made, and one of the reasons I'm genuinely kind of sorry it didn't work out at 411. And yes, you can finally, after all these years, quote me on that. But he was nothing but understanding, patient, welcoming, and I'm sorry, I just remembered they changed their pronouns. I'm still kind of getting used to it. It's been years of referring to them as he himself. Please, Jeremy, sincerest apologies. They were nothing but accepting, nothing but patient, nothing but guiding, and they have been every single time we've kind of talked about the goings on within our community ever since. The kind of friend that I believe that every queer person should have. And by the end of the movie, you realize that although the love was tough at first, you realize that was the found family
Hmm.
that Chi-Chi fell into. And did they fight like a family? Oh fuck yeah, the girls was fighting.
So, in the interest of time, I
But
gotta hit a few points here, and then we gotta move on to Hedwig,
okay,
because we're getting on an hour and a half now.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep the pacing. I swear.
It's fine, Sean. Next week here's the real test. We're gonna have rejoined by Matt Kettner, so we really have to
Ooh,
rein it in a bit. But
gay three-way, gay three-way.
and once again, I'm in a threesome I didn't want to be in. No,
I
so
did. Yeah.
I have a T-shirt and everything. Listen, Wesley Snipes, because there's three. Here's the thing: there's three distinct characters here. You have the one with the hero complex. You have the one, trying to every day is a struggle to prove to people he is what he is and not what you say he is. Then you have the one who the entire world is an enemy encampment, and it's so funny. Wesley Snipes' character, and I don't know if I would have thought about it. I certainly didn't. It didn't occur to me last year, and I don't know if it would have occurred to me as a high school, college kid. But Wesley Snipes' character is the one I kind of most identify with, not necessarily because I've been through that same struggle, but I understand more of him than I do Patrick
When I
Swayze
look
or
at
John
you, I think
Leguizamo.
hulking black man.
Good, thank you. That's why you come. That's why I always invite you back. You know how to butter me up. Just what the thing to say. Listen to me. Wesley Snipes' character. It's so funny because his whole thing is I adore and idolize Hollywood starlets. It's the thing he uses to connect with the elder woman character, the one who is mute and then finds the power of speech by talking to somebody who's interested in her as a
Mhm.
person. And that is the whole point that I'm trying to get across. Is that Wesley Snipes' character, Noxzema, is very well aware that he's black, a man, a gay, a drag, all of these things, and knows that all of these, any one of these things, let alone all of them, engender conflict, engender violence, and
Mhm.
he has decided very very intentionally, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be me, but I'm it's what I was saying about before about Felicia and Priscilla. This is the commonality is he's kind of coming from the Terrence Stamp point of view of learn how to navigate this world or you're gonna get yourself killed. No one's saying don't be you, but Jesus Christ, you don't have to be you every time in every place and put yourself in a position of fighting everyone. That's
Mhm.
stupid. That is a waste of your time and a quick way to get dead. And Wesley Snipes is like, so that is the basis for my character, but I'm also this person who really likes Hollywood starlets. And that's kind of all I want to talk about. And that's what I mean by like that's the part of his character that I connect with. I've often said, I don't want to go off on a long tangent about it, but I've often said that like, I wish people would engage me more about this sort of thing, podcasting and big ideas and things that I'm interested in, and not on the fact that I was a cancer survivor. I don't want
Mood.
to talk about my fucking cancer ever. Not that I'm ashamed of it or anything like that, but it's not. It's There's no talent in surviving cancer. And some would argue, well, you're a big, strong man and you manage to do it, and some people don't and can't even do that much. Oh, good for that.
Can I ask you something? Not as a movie reviewer, but as Sean Comer, your friend and a human being.
Okay.
And asking you as somebody with a background in psychiatry, why do you think it is that some groups are so constantly reduced to that one facet of their identity? The black person
I
that
got you.
meets
Robert
white people.
Robert Winfrey is a brilliant person, and he said something to me, and it stuck with me since he said it. And it was such a very plain, straightforward biological thing, but it was brilliant. One of the things the brain does well is categorize. It looks for patterns.
Okay.
And it wants to simplify things. It does not deal well with confusion and being bogged down in a lot of complexities. It wants to make sense of things. And so people intrinsically tend to latch onto a characteristic as a way of identifying and
that's just kind of
categorizing
the way
things.
they choose to kind of try to relate to that
Yeah.
person. I'm going to try really hard to relate to their experience as a black man or a gay person or an Asian or a Latino, anything like that.
They need something to kind of hook on
or
to,
a cancer survivor or a disability.
Right. So that's so Wesley Snipes going, I don't want to talk about that I'm a gay drag, yada yada yada. I want to talk about Hollywood starlets. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you, Wesley Snipes' character. I hear you, Noxzema. I liked that element of, if we could just talk about the movie. I like that part about the movie because, one, it was a very human, very lovely thing. It was like this poor woman. We talked about this with X. Boy, you get to be a certain age, and boy, does society just write you off. You are of no use to anyone. And this woman just kind of having that tacit realization that no one cares about me, and I'm no longer of value, so I'll just be mute and kind of exist as a husk of myself. And there's Noxzema, who is just looking for someone to not see her as all these other things and just see her as somebody who likes actors. And that's how they found a connection, and that's how she comes out of her shell, and they are able to form a bond. And then, and through that, Noxzema becomes less of a coward. She's willing to stand up to the guys in town who are hooting and hollering at the girls, and does something that annoyed me, but I'm going to allow it in this fictional fantasy land where she grabs the one guy by his balls, and somehow nobody seems to have a problem with this or stops
I love that part. I fucking loved it.
I'm so tired of that sort of thing, so I'm kind of like retroactively reacting negatively to it, but in its place, in its time, 30 years ago, it is what it is. And to wrap this up, and to kind of put a final bow on this, I like the movie. I think there's no way I can get around the fact this was clearly written for an American audience, with all of the notes and all of the keeping it sanitized as we could. I mean, Stockard Channing's last thing to Patrick Swayze, where I don't see you as a man, I don't see you as a woman, I see you as an angel, is as much of an apology for this movie as this movie's gonna make. In the sense of like, we don't know how else to talk about this, so we'll just say that, and we'll have Patrick Swayze kind of uncomfortably go, I'll allow it, and we'll move on from this. It's a nice scene. I got what they were going for with Stockard Channing saying that, in considering the relationship between the two, he's saving her from incessant domestic violence. It was like, I don't think anything was mean-spirited intended by it, but it was definitely like, there definitely seemed to be at some level with this movie a feeling of unease, and trying to reconcile that unease in the text of the movie. And I think there's a draft of this that's much more brave and much more in conflict with modern American mores in the year of our Lord 1995, that a studio exec was like, no fucking way, rewrite this. I'm not letting this. You're not putting this in American theaters. So I will give you the last 50 words or less, and then we'll get into Hedwig.
Okay, I'll do this as best I can. I normally don't go in for movies that I would consider to be especially idealistic, or especially those that really dive into Aaron Sorkin level fucking wish fulfillment. But I have to say, what I like about this movie is the fact that its idealism doesn't feel so far-flung. And that's
Mhm.
the fact that even what the townspeople are initially awkward about, save of course for Chris Penn's Sheriff Dullard. Yes, I know. But it's the fact that what they're put off by, as you know, revealed when Stockard Channing reveals she knew all along.
Yeah.
Not that it was three men dressed flamboyantly as women, but it was more their cosmopolitan nature
Yeah.
than anything else as outsiders to their little isolated hamlet that really kind of put their teeth on edge initially and made them resistant.
It's like,
But
you
the
don't belong
fact
here.
is,
Why? Because we're gay and drag? No, because you're fucking from the city. Jesus
well,
Christ.
but here's the important part. Here's the part that I liked, because I don't know if the symbolism was intentional, but it's right there. And you know, the phrase "no cops at Pride" exists for a reason. It's because too much of, the queer community's experience and history with police is made up of assault, exploitation, entrapment, sexual assault, rape, being preyed upon. That was what was happening at the time of Stonewall. This is what has to be explained sometimes to straight people, and even to a lot of younger queer people
And
who
to Roland
just
Emmerich.
yeah, exactly, who kind of don't know the history and why we have pride in the first place. So yeah, did it make my queer little heart swell a little bit when a sheriff rolls up with rhetoric and words that absolutely, no doubt, echo what people probably heard at the Stonewall riots when they took place, and to see a crew of brazenly unafraid straight people step up and say, "Go through us first. I wish you would." Um, is it pandering? Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, it's pandering because it is what every single queer person at some point has wished a fucking straight person who could have intervened would have done, but didn't. And so, yeah, for once, we get to see a movie that's not necessarily grounded, that's not necessarily just focusing on the darkest parts of our experience, and instead gets to just show our version of wouldn't it be great? Hey, this is what we like. No, we don't want to convert the straight people to being gay. We want you to just stand up for us as other human beings. Did that make me glad? Yes. And fuck you if you expect me to feel sorry for being glad that I got to see that little fantasy played out for once, because a lot of us in real life don't get to see it played out enough. So if that's a problem, if you feel like it's being shoved down your throat, you know what? At the time, there was a lot of shit about the queer community that was being shoved down our throats back in the 90s. So this was a breath of fresh air for us. I love this movie and I will not apologize for it.
Awesome. Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which, so let me tell you quickly about this. I didn't know what Hedwig and the Angry Inch was. I had never seen it. I'd never heard of it. You know, my first exposure to Hedwig and the Angry Inch, the typo negative cover of Hedwig and of the Angry Inch song, which if you haven't heard it, when this podcast is done, go listen to it. Typo Negative does an amazing cover of Angry Inch. And it was, for a while, it made like every like covers playlist I had. I have rocked out to Angry Inch. I almost introduced you as was it 6 inches down and 4 in the back. He's got an Angry Inch, Sean Comer. But I was like, I don't want to. But I just because I love the song, and Typo Negative's cover of it is fucking amazing. In any case, I am only even aware that this film existed because I had to do research for this triple feature a year ago to put this whole like trans triple feature together. That being said, Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a 2001 American musical comedy drama film written for the screen and directed by John Cameron Mitchell. Based on Mitchell and Stephen Trask's 1998 stage musical Hedwig and the Angry Inch, it accompanies Hedwig Robinson, a gay East German rock singer. Hedwig subsequently develops a relationship with a younger man, Tommy becoming his mentor and musical collaborator, only to have Tommy steal her music and become a rock star. The film follows Hedwig and her backing band, the Angry Inch, as they shadow Tommy's tour while exploring Hedwig's past and her forced sexual reassignment surgery. Mitchell reprises his role as Hedwig from the original production. Despite largely positive reviews from critics and audiences, the film's limited release only grossed $3.6 million from an estimated $6 million budget. The musical has since developed a devoted cult following. I am not the least bit surprised about that.
Oh.
In 2001, the film won Best Director and Best Audience Award at the Sundance Film Festival, as well as Best Directorial Debut from the National Board of Review, the Gotham Awards, and the Los Angeles Film Critics Association. Mitchell received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor, Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, and the Premiere Magazine Performance of the Year Award. $6 million budget, $3.6 million take altogether. It's won like tons of awards, nominated for others. All right. The only other thing I will say about this is I'm glad, as much as I was frustrated last year that we didn't get to do it when I planned it, because I am a slave to schedules, I'm glad it worked out because I slept through most of it the first time I watched it. And I watched it today with, being alert and paying singular attention to it. I wasn't distracted on my phone or anything like that. This is a brilliant movie.
Seems, if you don't mind me saying so, this seems like one that Lily would really enjoy.
It's funny you mentioned that. For her, she's been wanting to see a drag show for a while now, and Florida, it's a little touch and go to get a kid to a drag show, so it hasn't happened yet. However, and the Hamburger Mary's that used to be in Orlando is in some state of disarray, so I can't get her to Hamburger Mary's anytime soon. However, I did have tickets, so I got her for Christmas a year or so ago. Tickets to go see a stage performance at Janus Landing in Clearwater or St. Pete, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And I buy these tickets late 2023, I think it was. She gets them for Christmas. We get to the summer of 2024 when the performance is supposed to take place, and it rains, and we had to get a refund. So she has not seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and I've told her she should. And now, having watched the movie, because I know my daughter, she will appreciate it when she's older. I think now she'd struggle with it. But it is definitely, parts of it are definitely in her wheelhouse. Really, really quickly, like 50 words or less. Have you seen it before? Did you know about it?
Had not seen it before. The reason I was aware of it was because back when I was in college in the straight days, I remember reading a description of it on the calendar for Ragtag Cinema Cafe, the outstanding little independent theater in Columbia, Missouri. And I remember at the time reading it and thinking, Jesus, why would I pay to watch that? And now, much older and much more wiser and much more humble, I look at it and think I need to watch and appreciate this.
Hedwig Robinson, born Hansel in East Berlin. Hansel. In East Berlin, undergoes a botched gender reassignment surgery in order to escape to America with a U.S. soldier, only to be left heartbroken and alone, like you do. Now living in a Kansas trailer park, Hedwig fronts a glam rock band called the Angry Inch, a bitter nod to the surgery's outcome. Performing in rundown venues while obsessively pursuing her ex-lover, Tommy Gnosis. Tommy stole Hedwig's music and became a rock star, leaving her in his shadow. The film weaves between present-day performances and musical flashbacks, revealing Hedwig's struggle with identity, gender, betrayal, and self-worth. It all builds to a cathartic climax where Hedwig sheds her persona and embraces her fractured identity. Neither man nor woman, but something uniquely her own. Bittersweet, raw, and unforgettable, Hedwig is both a tragic character study and a declaration of queer resilience. Just right off the bat, the music in this is fucking killer. This is right up there in terms of music, where every song is a banger. It's right up there with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, also something I reviewed earlier this year. If you just like a good old-fashioned rock opera, then this is for you.
Oh yeah.
That said, and I'm going to give you a chance to give your craft review. This actually is a pretty, despite the shifts in time, this actually is a pretty clear narrative. You know, the songs act as sort of chapter headings for each part of the story. This you get, you know, as the story progresses, and then you flash back to context for where we are in the present day story. I think actually works in terms of knitting this whole thing together and backstitching it. Absolutely outstanding performances. And I want to give a special shout out to what's his face there, Michael Pitt, who I remembered from Boardwalk Empire, and keep confusing him with was it Dane DeHaan? Like him, Edward Furlong, and Dane DeHaan all like they're the same guy. And to a lesser extent, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, great. Now, oddly enough, when I finally watch Boardwalk Empire, that's going to help me actually recognize him. I'll just look for the one that looks like that Dane DeHaan motherfucker.
Yes, again, the four horsemen of the same white face: Leonardo DiCaprio, Michael Pitt, Dane DeHaan, and Edward Furlong. In any case, Michael Pitt actually, I think, like everybody in this movie is outstanding, but Michael Pitt, I have to give a special credit to, because he does a great job of playing the character, but the character's character is, I think, one that is readily identifiable in that, and something I that is a common theme throughout this movie when you think about the soldier and Hedwig, is the desire for a same-sex lover as long as no one's watching. And it comes up again and again. You know, like the bit where they reconcile for like 5 minutes, and then there's the accident, and then as soon as the cameras are on them, he's like denying this whole thing. Going to the existence of queer people who have to contend with, we're willing to accept you as long as nobody knows we're doing it. What an awful thing to live with. And that's kind of the thing that Hedwig talks about in various ways. And that's what I got out of the movie was, you know, we'll only accept this so long as no one knows we're doing so. And what a dehumanizing experience that is for people. Besides that, again, banger music, interesting themes, and stellar performances. Also, the makeup and costuming, especially on Hedwig, phenomenal. Just absolute. Some of the outfits that they have them performing in, absolutely fantastic. And again, I want to give special credit to the makeup artist who did Miriam Shore's makeup and costuming. I had to check a couple of times who that was. So, what did you think of Hedwig?
Well, let me start off by asking you a question, because I was thinking about this earlier, and I'm very intrigued to hear what you think about it. Do you perceive subtext, allegory, or both in the relationship between Hedwig and Tommy in terms of a straight artist blatantly stealing from a queer one and queer experiences, stealing art that was shaped by queer experiences, trans experiences specifically, while shoving the actual creator kind of as far
I have two
into the
words for you
periphery as possible.
Yeah, I have two words for you: black folks. Because it's not like
Well, that too, yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like I haven't heard that same, and I agree with it. Like, do you know how many black artists have said that the predominant mainstream culture that everyone is celebrating and equating with white people actually came from black people, but black people don't get any credit for it?
Oh, one of my favorite Most Def tracks off Black on Both Sides is Rock and Roll.
Right. So the fact that it happens to part of being a human being involves good and bad. No, you know, I don't want to get off on a tangent here because it'll invite an entire other conversation which we do not have time for.
I gotcha.
So I will say this: the human experience is both sad and glad. And when you know, and if you've learned nothing from the movie Inside Out, it's that, you know, you need both happiness and sadness. That said, I'm not the fact that mainstream culture steals from underground culture, and sometimes, whether that be the underground culture of black folks, the underground culture of gay folks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is in no way a surprise to me. And it's a tale as old as fucking time. More to the point, what do you think? You're special? You're not going to have your shit took? That is how mainstream moneyed culture operates. We look for the diamonds in the rough, and we claim them as our own. And people are just left wanting. That is a cultural experience in and of itself.
I don't think they were trying to say that we were unique or special in that we were stolen from. Just acknowledging that it was happening to us.
Sure.
Too. But the fact
hang
is,
on.
I like it because I like the way.
Second. You asked a question. I got to give you this one little interesting thing. So I did a whole TikTok on your septum ring is no longer punk rock. I was in a mood. Just accept that for what it was. And and my whole thing was about facial piercings and punk rock and anti-establishment and counterculture. And the first
I remember that one, yeah.
And the first comment I got on that was, yeah, facial piercings were a queer culture thing. Oh. Before it was punk rock. And I'm like, 49, you learn something new every day.
Well,
but I think that's an example of what we're talking about.
Well, but queer people have also always been very entrenched in punk, and we've been embraced by the punk community. It's one of the reasons why I think
Venn diagram.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that all plays very well into also the fact that there is, I won't say we wouldn't have rock and roll as we know it, period, without queer people, because that would be flat out wrong, and I know better. But there is a lot of rock and roll and pop music as we know it that absolutely does not take the shape we know and love without queer culture, queer contributions, queer inspirations. And I think Hedwig in its own way kind of honors that, by really kind of honing in on that, because
I'm laughing because you said that, and it just made me think of the people who didn't know Rob Halford from Judas Priest was gay. And Rob Halford,
yeah.
Did you miss the fucking leather everywhere and where we got that from? What do you,
The everything from the aesthetics, the presence, the presentation, the style. You can't say you would have any of that without queer culture to draw from. The fact,
real quick, and then I'm going to shut up and let you finish so that we can move on. Your dear friend and mine, Alexis, put up a meme, and it's one of the few things she's put up that didn't make me want to unfriend her.
Okay.
It was a like a Brady boxes of different pictures, and it was all guys in drag, but it was like Bugs Bunny, and all the stuff, Dustin Hoffman from Tootsie, and it was like, you've been entertained by drag your whole life, you just didn't know it. And that's kind of the thing that we're talking about here, is how much of a variety of cultures are drawn from to create this other culture that then becomes mainstream, and then there's this movement to like distance yourself from the source material.
Okay, well, I'm a fair man. I will say that runs counter to that, certainly clashes with some things she's said in the past. But I will say that yes, she's spot on for getting that right, and acknowledging that, and I applaud her for that. But what I like about it is the fact that you have a certain kind of dreamy kind of delirium, and sometimes I would say even dissociation, maybe even dysphoria, in how kind of they're depicting Hedwig's presence kind of on stage.
Yeah.
That I think not only lines up very much with the bombast and sometimes the kind of otherworldly, over the top otherworldliness, the pyro and ballyhoo, if you will, of rock and roll, and how that same flamboyance, that same sometimes dissociation, feeling disconnected from everything that's immediately around you, the dysphoria, that's that's also, as I've learned from raising a trans kid, also kind of foundational to that experience often. Um, and I think that showing that kind of served both masters, and it's one of the most admirable parts of it. Is it is absolutely um, just kind of making sure that. God, my train of thought's going here. I feel like I had something there that I was trying to say. Um, it's kind of melding the style and the substance, I think is what I'm getting at. Um, it's serving the kind of big glam rock, punk rock aesthetic, what have you, but at the same time, it's also speaking to that kind of trans metamorphosis
Hmm.
and kind of how it can feel like you're distancing, you can kind of feel so distant from everything else because you are so wrapped up in that confusion and that dissonance at times. And in this case, the fact that you're going through all this, and on top of that, you're kind of having your identity stolen. You're kind of having everything that was yours taken away, know, by a cisgender person. Um, I was watching that scene where Hedwig is just kind of walking away, kind of just naked down the alleyway. And man, if some days kind of watching, especially what's going on around my community right now, that isn't just a damn mood sometimes.
So
Just that kind of detached melancholy.
we just
So,
got a comment here from someone watching on YouTube, and I have to say this has been one of our more popular shows. We've had a fairly sizable audience for us tonight.
mhm.
But we have our friend here, Crystal Blue Faye. Maybe you know her, maybe you don't. Hedwig did not have gender dysphoria. Hedwig was conned by a grown American soldier to get surgery that maimed him. He was an abused child. Yes, we discussed that.
Yeah, I apologize. I used the wrong word there. So yeah,
All right.
good. That's a good catch. I'll cop to that.
So if there's nothing else about, I would highly recommend. First of all, I would highly recommend all three of these movies. But I
Well,
would
not
especially.
not. Oh, you know what? I know what it was. I think I was saying dysphoria, and I think I meant dysmorphia. And
Okay.
I don't even know if that's necessarily correct, but I think that's what I meant. Yeah, I'm rambling a bit.
I would absolutely recommend Hedwig and the Angry Inch, if nothing else for the music, but also I think the
Mm,
interesting story. I'm going to say this one last thing, and I don't want to necessarily, because we're almost at 2 hours, and I want to start to wrap up. But I was thinking, I think the thing that was most impressionable on me was how the undercurrent of, because not everybody accepts um, people within families in the LGBTQI community, because coming
mm,
out can be a contentious act. It often leads to banishment, exclusion, homelessness, which then
mm,
gives way to exploitation. And
mm,
exploitation can come across in many forms. And I think a scene, and this movie handled it in I thought was a weird way, because it definitely fought the urge to do what I think what a lot of movies done, was to make it look really overtly icky. This one made it equally icky, but not overtly so. And what I'm talking about is the bit where the soldier has the trail of candy that leads to him lying naked in the sun with his crotch buried in candy. And it's all the hallmarks of, would you like to get into my van, little boy, and have a lollipop, but dressed up as queer seduction. In a situation where, and it was heavily implied but not outright stated, you have a soldier who can't come out as gay. And
mm,
it does make me reflect on the Gordian knot that is people who want to live their true self but can't, even in 2025, with as much mainstream uh queer culture as there is. There are still people who can't get out of the tentacles of shame that right up alongside of it. And this stuff is still all very much tied together, and like we're still reconciling all of these things to a large degree. And it's almost a silly scene, but also a insidious scene. And that's why all these hours later, after I've watched it, of all the things I saw in this movie, that scene still stands out to me. Because it's not irreversible or anything like that, or boys don't cry, but it's still that same level of ickiness dressed up in almost kind of a hilarious moment. Because it's an absurd looking visage, but also gross, but also sexy. Because you change one or two elements and it's kinky. You change another two elements and it's awful. And it's just right on that weird line, It's like if you feng shui this thing in any which direction, completely changes the meaning of that one image.
Well, I mean, you and I both kind of participate in some alternative sexual lifestyles. So much of anything sexual kind of amounts to that.
Yeah.
Where too far in one direction, and you have gone from possibly as much as thrillingly taboo to actually being skeevy and genuinely uncomfortable.
Another comment
Hedwig
in here.
Hedwig is a horror musical, like Hard Candy is a horror. Crystal Blue Fay, love it, spot on. Okay. I would agree completely.
Well, Sean, unless you've got any other burning desires, I believe that wraps up our kickoff to Pride Month here on the Radulich and Broadcast. And everyone, what a kickoff it was! I really enjoyed the show. It's been a long time since you and me, collar and elbow tied up, and did a 4-star classic across Iron Man match across 2 hours. But there will be no overtime, Sean. I am Bret Hart, and I am leaving at the end of 60 minutes. God damn it! Got some shows I'm Shawn Michaels, some I'm Bret Hart, some I'm Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Anyway,
I'm usually content to just be CM Punk. So
fair enough.
Or at least.
So next week we have our director focus. We will be looking at the Wachowski sisters, and we'll be joined by Matt Kettner, who has been on a bunch of my triple features as of late. We are looking at, now you might be thinking, oh, they're going to do the Matrix movies. Nope, we've already done those. So instead, we're going to do Bound, Cloud Atlas, and Jupiter Ascending. And it'll only be the second time I've talked about Jupiter Ascending on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, because I am a glutton for punishment.
It's only going to be the second time I've seen it.
And then we are ending Pride Month with a pair of biographical pictures. We are looking at Milk, Kinsey, that's going to be an interesting one, and Lizzie, about Lizzie Borden. So I don't know if you've seen any of those, Sean, but it promises to be an absolutely interesting discussion, to say the least.
Absolutely. Again, I apologize for that verbal gaffe on Hedwig. I'm so embarrassed by that. Please forgive me. Earnestly, I was grappling for the wrong word. I can't think of it for one word too many. Was what I did.
In the 20 years I've been doing this, I'm more than one incidental mistake. It's really okay. Yesterday, speaking of incidental mistakes and okay, me and Harry Broadhurst talked pro wrestling. We looked at Money in the Bank, Worlds Collide. We talked about R-Truth. We talked about CM Punk going to Saudi Arabia. And we talked about Jey Uso losing the title to Gunther. Prior to that, myself and Robert Winfrey talked about Ballerina from the world of John Wick. Did an extended bit on why Ana de Armas cannot lead her own film. It's just terrible. Next week, by God, we've got no bananas. Sunday night is Father's Day, and what better way to spend Father's Day than talking with your best pal about Darth Vader comics? So myself and Jesse Starcher are going to look at Darth Vader 1 through 4 plus Vader Down, which was a crossover book. Damn You Hollywood is back with the How to Train Your Dragon live action movie. We will be reviewing The Critic season 1 and 2 Wednesday the 18th, and then a week from tonight, like I said, is Bound, Cloud Atlas, and Jupiter Ascending. Sean, tell us where you play your video games at and where people can watch you.
Glad you asked. I am back to streaming on Twitch. I've actually been streaming a couple times a week for the last few weeks, feeling good. And as a matter of fact, once we sign off tonight here in just a few seconds, 11 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to be at the address you see right there on the screen, twitch.tv/ComerCodex. I'm going to be playing a few hours of ranked Overwatch. Hopefully it'll be a fun time. I hope to see at least some of you there. Please drop in whenever.
All right, Sean, I'm glad you're back in the fold because whether we agree or disagree, we always have great conversations.
Always.
So I'm glad to have you back. For Sean Comer, I, as per usual, at the end of any 2-hour podcast, have to pee. Be well, be safe, and happy Pride Month.